All right. Happy Monday, everybody. Great to see all of you as you file in on Twitch, Twitter, live stream on Twitter. Great to see all of you if you are tuning in. Also on YouTube. Brendan Glasheen with Matt Meiselman today. No Jeff Ulrich. He has other business to attend to, so we will miss him for the next hour or so. We take you up until 6 o'clock. No Madden Sims the rest of the night with Monday Night Football. We will get to Monday Night Football after we react to yesterday. This is DraftKings, the Slate. We're breaking down all things fantasy sports as well as sports betting. Meiselman, you and I both share similar sentiment as far as how we feel about Week 9 Sunday in the NFL. It was not great, in my opinion.
No, it really wasn't. And also, I'm sad that Jeff's not here, but I'm also a little bit relieved because I was going to have to hear a lot about how the Titans are actually good. And I've been wrong for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I guess I just have to hear that from myself now. I don't have to hear it from him for too long. Yeah, I don't know what happened in that game or many of the other games. I mean, I thought the Bills were in the driver's seat for the 1 seed in the AFC after combination of things that happened. One of them was Derrick Henry getting injured, but just the Bills were the one team who hadn't really had a bad game. And then, oh my God, like I don't even know what to say about that. Like I didn't watch the game in full, but I had Red Zone on, and every time they showed it, it was just like, this is going to be the time where the Bills get a touchdown, right? And it was like, nope, that just it was an entire football game with no touchdowns. Maybe they were. Honestly, I don't have an explanation for what that was. There are a couple of games I do have an explanation for, though, and I think we probably were on the same page a little bit on the Bengals, where like they beat the Ravens, and then we talked about last week after their Jets lost that this was a team that went from underrated to overrated very, very quickly.
Yep.
And I think people in general bought a little too much into them. So like the Bengals getting blown out at home against the Browns, that one I can explain just as like, this is an inconsistent young team, young quarterback, mistake prone Joe Burrow. He's going to look great at times. He's going to look bad at times. I think we understand that, but like Dak Prescott not putting up any points through 3 quarters, I have no idea. Bills, I have no idea. I don't know what happened to the Rams last night. So maybe you have some better insights than I do.
So I really do want to start. I want to start with one positive as far as how I'm feeling as a football consumer about last night's game. The running back doesn't matter that much. Like last night proves it once again that we all overreacted. Maybe not all of us, but the public, most people overreacted to Derrick Henry being out. Now, granted, some of us had to see what it looked like last night before we had any confidence in the Tennessee Titans. I just figured the Rams are still a better football team, whether Derrick Henry played that game last night or not. But the running back does not matter all that much. It's in the hands of Ryan Tannehill, who early on, it did not look great. Ryan Tannehill throws an interception. Rams have a 3-0 lead. They have the ball. And then Matt Stafford turns into the quarterback. Meiselman, I thought he'd be week 1, week 2, week 3. The way he looked last night was how I thought the season would begin for the Rams and why folks were buying too much into the LA Rams. It happens in week 9 at home on Sunday Night Football. But what we found out now about Tennessee, regardless of their running back status, they are a big game team. They are 4-0 now this year, or they've won 4 in a row as an underdog. That's pretty amazing. Underdogs were great yesterday altogether, but the Tennessee Titans get up for big games. They just do. Tennessee beat Kansas City. They beat Buffalo, and they beat somebody else, and I can't remember who it is.
They beat the Colts too. Although, to be fair, I think there is something there. Carson Wentz gave them that game against Indianapolis. But the other one, I mean, yeah, they've played really well lately. So maybe that is just kind of the trend for them. They've just gotten better all in unison at the right time. I think they probably did have some defensive injuries that were holding them back early on. And maybe just the threat of having both Brown and Julio in the lineup together at least opens up. You know, we saw tight ends just wide open for them all game long because the defense has to focus on those 2 receivers. So maybe it's just that, right? Like they're just getting a little bit healthier and they're not getting healthier at running back, but who cares? Like it's the one position that it doesn't really matter, even with someone as great as Derrick Henry. So maybe that kind of just explains it, but I'm almost glad. I am glad this isn't on video because my take before the season on Stafford was, are we really sure that he's that much better than Jared Goff? Like, Let's compare these 2 careers. Goff got a team to the Super Bowl, although maybe he wasn't totally responsible for it. Like he's had some good moments. And that was looking like the worst take of all time for 2 months. Now it doesn't sound. I mean, Goff's had a terrible year, so I still don't want to say like
Yes.
Stafford is.
Well,
Goff hasn't been
win,
good.
to your point, the win total for the Lions didn't change all that much when Stafford left. You know,
Yeah.
or maybe I'm thinking, hold on one second, give me a minute. When Goff left the Rams win total didn't change much.
Neither changed that much. It's more about the rest of those teams. I mean, Cooper Kupp could be the best receiver in the NFL. The Rams have a great defense. The Lions have arguably the worst defense in football. The context of those two teams is so different. But at the same time, Matt Stafford was the favorite for NFL MVP for about 2 hours. I think it was right after the 4 o'clock window and right before their game started. Stafford had moved into the top spot as the favorite. And I think now it's probably, I forget exactly who it is. It's either Brady or Allen. I think probably
it's
Brady.
both. They are co-favorites right now for MVP.
Okay.
We can certainly discuss that as well. Everyone, and now Tom Brady is suddenly on the same level as Josh Allen as far as the odds, which I think is silly. I think DraftKings is trying to bait people into betting Brady to win the award. And we've talked about this. It's a popularity contest. I think for 1 week, they didn't overreact to Josh Allen. Like Josh Allen, to me, still deserves to be up at the top here. You're allowed one bad game or two. But the other candidates, suddenly they're out of it. They're behind Tom Brady, who lost his last game. I'm a big Brady guy. But as far as who I think is going to win the award, I don't think it's going to change much with voters. And I'm surprised to see someone like Dak Prescott fall very far. Like he's allowed to have one bad game. Is he not?
Yeah.
Now, he did miss a game, which doesn't help. At plus 1,200, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that's a whole nother story as far as the off-field narrative. Maybe people just won't be into Aaron Rodgers, but there's Lamar Jackson at plus 1,000. They won yesterday.
Yeah, I think ultimately what drives this more than anything, though, is just what people are betting. And I would imagine, I don't actually have the numbers in front of me, but after watching Sunday afternoon's games, people were just hammering Tom Brady. It's like, look how terrible everyone is. Josh Allen's falling apart. Kyler Murray's not playing. Dak Prescott has the worst game of his season. And then even before the Stafford game started, Brady was in good shape. And then Stafford has a terrible game. So it's like, all right, Brady, like, let's bet Brady. I think there could be some of what you're saying, like DraftKings wants to entice people to bet him. But I don't really think that there's that much conscious choice there. I think it's mostly just like the Brady bets are coming in now because that's an easy narrative to spin, is just everyone was terrible. Brady had a bye. Let's give him credit. I do think, though, that, like, first of all, I don't think any player has more than a 15% chance to win MVP right now. Like, this is totally wide open. It's just if you had asked me a week ago, I thought Josh Allen was really in the driver's seat. He had been good every game. Other quarterbacks were dealing with injuries. Brady had just come off a pretty bad game against the Saints. Like, that was a thing. And Allen had been really just great through the whole year. At this point, to me, the best value is probably Kyler. Like, he had one semi-bad game against the Packers, and then he missed one game. And if he comes back this week, I mean, he's still having a really, really great statistical season. But that's more like the odds are longer than Allen and Brady, and I think there's a value because of that. Truthfully, I have absolutely no idea who wins this thing. I think you could probably go down as low on this list as Derek Carr and still say he is a shot.
Wow.
Because, like, it's just so wide open. I don't think I would bet him now, but
Derek Carr's on Sunday Night Football against Patrick Mahomes. He knocks him off, and maybe to your point here, you've been big on the Raiders as favorites. They should be favorites to win the AFC West. Granted, they didn't have a great day yesterday.
I don't feel that way anymore, but yeah, I did up until they they lost ground. It really is as simple as that. They just lose to the Giants while everyone else in your division wins. You're going to lose a lot of ground.
Yeah. So one other thing from yesterday I want to jump on before we transition to Monday Night Football is just what to make. And the Titans, of course, are a good jumping off point, but Meiselman, what do you make of the AFC? Every week, I feel like I can't figure out this conference. I really can't. I'm not going to overreact to a bad week for Stafford, Kyler being out, even Aaron Rodgers. Like, I think that will eventually, now I don't think it's going to end well in the offseason, but they're still fine. They're 7-2. I think it's pretty much everyone's minds are made up as far as who the contenders are in the NFC. Even Dallas, a bad day yesterday. I think we all overreacted. I admit I did, to the Von Miller trade and how it would impact that locker room. But the AFC, I think the teams that had to win yesterday won. Cleveland, New England, Chargers, Kansas City, all won. Baltimore, all won. Cincinnati and Vegas, they lose. What do you make of the conference? And do you have and Buffalo too. Buffalo loses yesterday. See, I can't even keep track now. I just rattled off like 8 teams that I feel like could win the conference.
Yeah, you're almost all the way there to just listing out the entire NFL.
Yeah,
so it's true. It's true. It's wide open. Well, the thing I want to reiterate,
and real quick, Pittsburgh's on tonight. What if Pittsburgh wins? And they've won 4 in a row. I know they were 10-0 last year, and some people took the cheese on Pittsburgh, and then you're reminded, oh yeah, Big Ben can't make it through 2/3 of the season.
Right, but maybe it doesn't matter. Like maybe as long as he's on the field, like as long as he's literally out there, no matter how slow he is, like they still have a shot because the rest of the team is good. No, the thing I've been harping on for a while that I think is still worth highlighting, like it's the most important thing, at least in my mind, in football, is that the number of games these teams play is so small, and we don't actually know how good anyone is. Like we have some sense, but just to make the comparison, the Los Angeles Lakers have played more games this season than any football team. Like, and we're like, oh, let's give the Lakers time. They'll sort it out. You know, it's early.
Right.
They played 10 games. No one in the NFL's played 10 games. And we're like, yeah, we know how good all these teams are. It's just not that many games. Like, it's not that many. It's not a big sample to figure out who the best and worst teams are. And it's really easy to just say, oh, look, the Bengals are 5-2. They beat the Ravens, and now they're a contender for the Super Bowl. And then they lose 2 in a row. And it's like, well, the Bengals aren't going to even make the playoffs now. Look how bad they are. They lost to the Jets. And then they got killed at home by the Browns. Like, not that those are necessarily wrong takes, because I do think some of the time you can be very sure who the best teams are. The odds of like Tampa Bay just turning into a non-playoff team are slim because they have established veterans. We know these guys have really good track records of being good for a long time, but who would have possibly thought the Chiefs offense would have turned into a below average offense, which it has been for like a lot of this season? It just comes out of nowhere sometimes. Part of it, so I think big part of it is the number of games that teams play. And then part of it is, in football in particular, the one thing that is probably always worth acknowledging that we don't often acknowledge is just the violent nature of the sport and the way that injuries can affect performance. And we don't know who's playing with stuff. Like Patrick Mahomes, it may come out after the season that he's got some broken bone in his leg somewhere. And obviously they're not, if he can play through it, they're not going to tell anyone because they don't want the defensive line to know about that. This kind of thing happens all the time where after the year we find out someone was severely compromised and the team just didn't want to release that information to compromise their player. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's probably a lot of that going on all the time. Players are dealing with injuries and it can have a huge impact and we just don't know. So I kind of like, especially after this past week, just want to throw out my hands and say like, I have no idea, like who even knows what football is anymore. But at the same time, we obviously we can use this information to make some concrete analysis. And we still have a general idea of which teams are good and not good. Maybe it's just a lot more vague than we really think it is.
2 weeks ago, the Tennessee Titans with a healthy Derrick Henry were plus 800 to win the AFC, plus 1,800 to win the Super Bowl. Last week at plus 700, plus 1,600 to win the Super Bowl. That was the adjustment when we got the Henry news on this show last Monday. And now, after a win on the road against the Rams, without Derrick Henry, they are plus 450, the second favorite in the AFC, and at plus 1,000 to win the Super Bowl, which we'll get to this. But now they're only 2.5-point favorites at home against New Orleans, who lost their quarterback for the year and lost to Atlanta. So again, to your point, how good is Tennessee if they're lying for this coming week off another amazing win against a blue blood in the conference or in the National Football League, the Rams? And they're 2.5-point favorites at home. I mean, that tells you all you need to know about that's the second best team in the AFC.
So this is actually the first week, if you go by Football Outsiders DVOA, this is the first time this year the Tennessee Titans are into the positives as a team rating. They finally crossed the 0 after their impressive win over the Rams. They're now considered by DVOA to be a slightly above average team. Like that's how fickle it is. I think the reason that you see that crazy divide where the Titans are in the mix for a bye, one of the Super Bowl favorites, and yet barely favored at home against New Orleans is just in terms of future betting, it has to do with positioning. And they're right up there now. They're 7-2. They're likely going to have a home playoff game. They've essentially clinched their division. So if you go back 2 weeks ago to before the Colts game, they were only 4-1 favorites to win the AFC South, and they were 3-point road underdogs in Indy. If they had lost that game, that division would have become a coin flip. And then you're talking about the Titans maybe not even making the playoffs. Like if they don't win that game in overtime, their playoff odds following that game would have been something like pick'em, because the AFC South at that point didn't look very strong.
Right. And Indy would have split, which gives the Colts a chance.
Right. And Indy would have been on a pretty strong winning streak at that point. They had just come off a win against the Niners. Like that game could have gone the other way. Carson Wentz made, I think, the worst throw a quarterback, although Matt Stafford kind of equated it last night with the pick he threw. And
he threw it with his right hand, not his left hand. So
right. Wednesday. Yeah. I don't understand Carson Wentz sometimes. But yeah, like it just changes so fast. And now you have a 7-2 team. It almost doesn't matter how good they actually are. Just the fact that they have that record means that they're in a prime position to be able to make a run to the Super Bowl, because they're almost assured of a home playoff game in the first round now. And then they have a chance for a bye, especially because the Bills lost to the Jaguars. So like that puts them in a good position too. They're a game and a half up on the Bills and they already beat them. So from like tiebreaker scenario, from a record scenario, like those things make the Titans a very strong pick to go to the Super Bowl. But at the same time, they're still probably not a great team. And the Saints just beat Tampa Bay 2 weeks ago. So like, what do we make of the Saints? Like, sure, they played terribly against Atlanta, but the Saints are still fine. I would not be shocked at all if the Titans lose this game this week.
All right, we have a couple questions in the chat about tonight's game, Monday Night Football. It's kind of a gross matchup. Let's just be honest.
Yes,
3-5 Chicago, 4-3 Pittsburgh. The Steelers have won 3 in a row. The Bears are not winning games as of late. They have scored only 13 points per game over their last 3. We'll use a question as a jumping off point. We can use the showdown as a way to start our conversation. Are we playing a quarterback tonight, Meiselman? We'll get to captains unless you think you got to captain a quarterback. But the question about playing a quarterback in the showdown, in particular from Miami Misfits, Justin Fields becoming more comfortable as a mobile quarterback. I think this all relates to Matt Nagy and the play calling. Where are you at with Justin Fields as a play in showdown?
This is a really hard showdown. I know we talked about this a little before we were on air, because the pricing on the high end guys, first of all, these are concentrated offenses, and then the top end players are just very expensive, and we don't have a Jerick McKinnon on this slate who just makes everything work. So I think Fields could actually be relatively contrarian. I don't love first of all, I don't think he's good, at least not yet. It's a tough matchup in Pittsburgh.
That was funny.
I think, but he could be a good.
I don't think he's good.
He could be a good fantasy quarterback without being a good NFL quarterback because of the way he runs. So that is a little bit of a difference there. And I do think he has the potential to become a very good quarterback. He just isn't yet. His stats this year are not that good. And like, he's shown a lot of inconsistency. And the Steelers are a good defense, and the game's in Pittsburgh. It's outdoors. It's starting to get cold now. Like, these are all bad things for him. But at the same time, Najee Harris is more expensive, is going to be insanely popular. And I think that way less people are going to play Fields, especially a captain. So it's a viable strategy. I think this is going to be a really difficult slate to figure out what lineup construction makes the most sense. I don't necessarily want to start a lineup though where I play Najee captain and then Fields in the lineup too, because I just think that's going to be very common. So it's more about what do you do with Harris than it is what do you do with Fields. A lineup that starts with Harris in the captain slot, it's going to be hard to make a unique version of it if you also play Fields, because then you're just kind of hamstrung salary wise, and you're going to kind of just get stuck on the same group of players that everyone else is.
Okay. Now, are we underrating what Ben Roethlisberger can do tonight?
Potentially. Possibly? Yeah, potentially. So I think,
by the way, the Bears allowed the 11th fewest passing yards per game. So their defense has been okay. But the Bears can't throw the football on their end. So it makes me wonder if the Steelers can stop the run, Big Ben could have a night where it's a time of possession kind of game. And we're not, like I said earlier about Pittsburgh being a contender in the AFC. It's not week 12 yet. Big Ben has not broke yet. He's not there. We're in week 9 still.
Generally with Roethlisberger though, I think that, so the way I think about Roethlisberger for DFS is I love playing him on main slates when no one has him, because there are games where they get behind and he just chucks. Like when the Steelers are losing, you can just count on him to throw the ball 40 plus times. And it can be very lucrative fantasy wise, but he throws so many short passes that the odds of him outscoring his own team's wide receivers are generally pretty low. So like you'll see, I mean, people who watch the Steelers certainly know this, the amount of wide receiver screens and 10-yard outs and just over the middle slants, like very, very quick hitting plays with a 1-point PPR format. Like the way that Ben Roethlisberger outscores Deontay Johnson is just like, he throws to Claypool a bunch of times, and then does he outscore Claypool, or he throws a bunch of dump offs to Harris? Like most likely 1 or 2 Steelers are going to outscore Roethlisberger, because he's just like, first of all, he's not going to run the ball into the end zone unless it's at the half-yard line and he can just lean forward, because he doesn't move very much. So you have virtually no upside for that. So it's not that I think he's not going to have a good game. It's that I'd rather play his pass catchers. It's this weird quirk. I don't know that we can say that about another team where they just throw the ball short so often. I find myself not playing him in showdowns very much. Like I think I'm probably underweight to the field on Roethlisberger in showdowns, like every single time he's on one. And that's not to say I don't like the Steelers passing game. Like I almost think if there's a team where you can justify playing a receiver or a captain without even having the quarterback in the lineup at all, it's the Steelers, just because of the nature of how their offense works. Right. So I'm actually kind of leaning that way, where I think you can captain Deontay Johnson and then just play Najee Harris and not even play Roethlisberger, because Roethlisberger could throw for, I don't know, 250 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he does it with like 37 completions, and it's just everyone else on the team gets so many points. That's essentially what I'm saying there.
You can't ignore the targets for Johnson, 13 in each of the last 2 games that he's played this year. That is certainly something we have to consider and keep our mind on. How about the Chicago running game? Because we know what Harris is the guy for Pittsburgh, but now David Montgomery, it's reported he will return off IR, will be active tonight, 8,400 in the flex. Then you have Herbert, who has filled in okay-ish in his absence. It's not like Montgomery was tearing the cover off the turf before he got hurt. Are you even considering playing a running back for the Bears? Because we figure, well, see, I don't even know if Pittsburgh's going to have a lead in this game. It won't be that convincing of a lead. So yeah, I'm curious. Maybe the value in the Bears is to stay away from the running game and get some cheap receivers.
So value-wise, yes. I actually love the Bears running game because I think it's going to be insanely contrarian. Like that's mainly the reason. Last week, I think we did well in figuring out what was going to happen ownership-wise, and then somewhere from somewhere, Derek Gore showed up and vultured like all of Darrell Williams' work. Like I didn't even know that. Right. We did not know that person existed until the game started and he was on the field.
When I saw Gore, I'm like, where the hell's Jerick McKinnon? What happened to this Jerick McKinnon secret? This Jerick McKinnon chalk in the captain. Jerick McKinnon, I think, what do you have? 1 catch? He was like nowhere to be found.
Well, McKinnon did kind of the normal McKinnon role. It was just that Gore took half of Williams' work because McKinnon was still on the field for like obvious passing situations and third downs and whatever. McKinnon doesn't get the ball very much. He's just kind of in there to block, actually, a lot of the time on passing downs. Williams just lost half of his work to Gore for some reason. I don't know where that came from. But the point there is that Williams was relatively contrarian, and it was just a matter of pricing dynamics where he just didn't really fit because if you were paying up for Hill and Mahomes, you couldn't afford him. I think that's the phenomenon we're going to have tonight. The difference is that we have an obvious split between Herbert and Montgomery. Maybe you have a better insight than I do on who the lead back is, who the backup is. But my hunch is that it's going to be no more than 60-40 in either direction. Like we don't know who the lead running back is, but it's going to be relatively close to a split regardless. And both of them are actually somewhat expensive. They are not easy to fit into lineups, but Herbert in particular, I think because Montgomery's coming back, that's going to be a little more hyped up. I think that no one's playing him. Like I think Montgomery.
Just here, let me shed some light on what you're asking here. Patrick Finley of the Chicago Sun-Times. Herbert expected to shift into a complementary role with the Bears set to reinstate David Montgomery.
Yeah. So Montgomery could be I don't know, 25% in tournaments, and Herbert could be like 5. Like, I really don't think that that's inconceivable. And Herbert could play 45% of the snaps, and he also could get more work in passing situations. I think we have no idea how this is going to break down. So I definitely like playing one of them. I lean towards Herbert because I think he'll be significantly less popular. But if you just look at where they're priced, how do you fit these guys without essentially just fading Najee Harris, which I don't think anyone's going to do. So it's not that I think Harris is the guy you need to fade. It's just that you probably, I mean, for me, I probably only want to play one, or I guess I should say 2 of Harris, Fields, Ben, and Deontay. Like, you limit yourself to just 2 of those 4, and then you just start playing these mid-tier guys that I think people don't get to. So that could be Herbert, that could be Montgomery, that could be Claypool, that could be Allen Robinson at 7,200. That could be, I think there's one more guy I'm forgetting here. Cole Kmet, 5,800. He's still like a little expensive. And with Jimmy Graham back, like maybe that's probably too expensive for people who want to pay also. Like, this whole mid-tier, I don't even necessarily have an opinion on who the best plays there are. I just like the whole range. So it's more just like, this is the pricing area where it's difficult to fit them. And I like all of them. And I guess the last thing we have to talk about is, in order to do that, I think you have to not play Harris in the captain slot.
Right.
Like, I think you play him, you just don't play him in the captain slot because it's just going to be too popular a strategy. And then it also hamstrings your lineup too much in terms of salary.
Well, and he's kind of hard to figure out too, right? As far as Harris in the passing game, he's not very consistent as far as targets and receptions. I mean, looking at this Denver game, 2 receptions on 5 targets. Then he has a nice game against Seattle in the passing game on Sunday Night Football. Only 3 targets against Cleveland last week in a low-scoring game. So
that Cincinnati game is just wild. Like, I don't even understand what that means looking at that on the screen there.
Is that right?
Yeah. That was the game. So in the game against the Bengals,
like years ago,
it was 14 receptions on 19 targets.
Yep. For a second, I was
like,
I'm
mixing up which receivers it was. One of the Steelers receivers was inactive before the game, and then one of them got injured during the game. I don't remember which of the 3. I think Juju was the one that got knocked out of the game, and I think Deontay may have been out that day. I may be getting that wrong. It was either Deontay or Claypool was already out when the game started, and then Juju got hurt. So there were they didn't have receivers. I don't think Freiermuth had really become a main part of the offense at that point yet.
Yeah.
So he was like their whole offense that day, and they were losing, and the Bengals were just giving them checkdowns. All those catches were like 6-yard dump offs over the middle. So it was just a very strange game for Harris that day. If you're going to look at the full season stats, you're going to see like this massive target share, but it really just comes from this one game. So honestly, I don't know what that means. Yeah, it could be skewed by that one game.
Yeah, and even you mentioned Kmet with Jimmy Graham back. The tight ends aren't very appealing. I mean, Freiermuth is $7,000. That's pretty steep for a
well,
tight
you're
end.
aware there's a narrative that tight ends always do better in showdown slates. This is a kind of like a mainstream consensus now. Everyone seems to know this.
How'd they do last week? Well, Evan Engram played well.
Yeah.
And Jeff was down on him. Not down on him, but he said maybe. Like, I think we brought up Evan Engram as a question from the chat, and we weren't like jumping off the screen here advocating.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also true that we've had a Tennessee Titans tight end in a Millie winning lineup, or at least a large, I think last night was 300,000.
Oh yeah. Right.
In a winning lineup twice this season. You know what? It was Tommy Sweeney against the Titans for Buffalo. And then last night Swaim was in the winning line. This is like a thing that's, I guess, like a cheap tight end catches 1 touchdown, and that's enough. But honestly, I mean, good luck figuring out who that's going to be. And also, my take on it is tight ends score random touchdowns all the time. It's just no one cares when it's not a showdown slate because no one even knows. So I'm not reading anything into that. But that being said, I do think Cole Kmet could be a good contrarian option because I don't think a lot of people are going to play him at that price.
I want to look at the sports book here, and it kind of relates to DFS as well because I just read up on Gary and Thorne. You can find his article on the DK Playbook. Julian Edlow also at DraftKings sharing the most bet player props, and Allen Robinson comes in as the number 1 player prop as far as his receptions. Over 3.5 is still plus money on the DraftKings Sportsbook at plus 115. Allen Robinson's only had 1 double-digit fantasy game this year, and it was barely 10 points. What is wrong? Now, look, this is more indicative of what the issues have been for the Bears as an offense. But is this a game where we could get the old Allen Robinson, or is it just it's broken? Is he broken there?
So I don't think Justin Fields is the type of quarterback that, at least at the current stage of his career, can support a receiver being consistently a number one guy. One, because he just hasn't been very efficient, and two, because he runs so much. Like, you're just not going to see high volume for a receiver, and you're not going to see very like accurate passing, generally speaking. That being said, like, I think it's a good buy low spot for Robinson. So if you're asking me, like, do I think is the upside for eight catches and 100 yards like he used to do all the time? I really don't think so. But do I think that 3.5 receptions at plus money is a good bet towards the over? Like, that I can get behind. Like, that makes more sense to me. I think we see somewhere in the middle of what Allen Robinson's been and what like the classic version of Allen Robinson is, where he's just like, he is really talented, but he's not in a good offense for getting wide receiver fantasy points. So he should do better than what he's been doing. Like, I mean, look at that game log. It's
It's sad.
Too good for, yeah, it really is.
It's really sad. The second most bet player prop, according to Ed Lowe's splits from the DK Sportsbook, Big Ben over a touchdown and a half passing. I find that interesting. Najee Harris, the rushing prop I find that to be kind of steep. It's interesting. The over at 79.5. And then after that, at number 4, Najee Harris under. That speaks to the popularity of, whether or not folks are going to play him in the captain spot potentially. But those are some player props. And I really wanted to bring that in to get to the sports book, but also relate it back to Allen Robinson. We can certainly talk more props if we have any thoughts on them. Even Justin Fields, his rushing prop to me is something you got to consider. Now it's moving. It's at 40.5. I thought it was I saw it at 36.5 earlier, but so that's moving up. What are your thoughts on the line as well as the total? The total is intriguing because these two teams in their 15 games combined, the under is hit 11 times. Like, that's the story. It's one of the lowest unders of the year at 40.
So first of all, on the props, I think that there's a point.
We can do that first. That's cool.
Yeah, I think there's a point on some of these props, especially with lower numbers, that people don't understand very well. So when you are trying to figure out if something is a good, let's take, for example, Fields 40.5 rushing yards. If he averages 40.5 rushing yards, that doesn't necessarily tell you that that's a fair line, because you don't care what he gets on average. You care how often he can eclipse that number. This becomes even more clear when you're talking about a touchdown prop. So like, if Ben's prop is 1.5 touchdowns and he averages 2 a game, that seems like an easy bet. The problem is that he may only go over 1.5 40% of the time. It's just that when he does, he may get 2, 3, 4 touchdowns, and that inflates the average, but he's still not going over the number more than half the time. So like, the further you get up in number, so like if you're talking about a quarterback passing prop of 300 yards, that you no longer have that mathematical problem, because I guess essentially what I'm saying is it's normally distributed, where like if you have a 300-yard passing prop, the quarterback averages 300, he's just as likely to go over or under, because it's just such a big number. There's so much, like, I guess it's the thing that outlines it the best is he's equally likely to get 325 and 275 with a 300-yard number. With 1.5 touchdowns as your average, you're not equally likely to get 2 and 1. Because 0 is actually a very unlikely outcome. 1 is probably more likely than 2, but then you have 3 and 4 as increasing possibilities. So like, it's not the same thing. So that's why, like, yeah, I see this all the time where it's like, this guy he's an over under 1.5 touchdowns. He averages 1.8, therefore over bet. It's like, that's not how that works. So to tie that into someone specific, like I kind of feel like these rushing props for quarterbacks tend to always be inflated. Like with Fields. That's more of a hunch though. Like, maybe you have a better read on it, but I feel like what people look at there is the possibility that he breaks a 40-yard run on a single play feels likely enough, or that he gets 220s or something like that, like he probably hits the over. But I feel like he's only going to do that like once every 3 or 4 games. And most likely he's just going to have a few 8-yard runs and probably come in well under that number. I don't know. Do you feel like if he's going to hit the over, how is he getting there?
Well, I feel like you got to consider Pittsburgh defensively with that front seven. He might have to run for his life a few times, and they might turn to that as an option. to give the kids some confidence. They've got to try something else here. Now, I know they're going to get Montgomery back tonight. You even mentioned Herbert in the showdown as a better option to save a little money. They're trying to get this kid going. Like, I think you watch Jalen Hurts and they figure we got to find a way to stay in this race. Nagy's coaching for his job tonight. I mean, he's probably coaching for his job really since every week this year. Don't get me wrong, but tonight's a big night. You're 3-6, or you can be 4-5 and stay kind of in it. But he's been right around this number the last 3 games for Justin Fields. Look at the game logs, right? He went for over 100 against San Francisco, 38 against Tampa in a game they got blown out, in a game against Green Bay where they hung around, and he got 43. So he's hit it in 2 of the last 3 games. And the one he didn't hit it, he was 2 yards shy of the number, 3 yards shy of hitting the over.
Right. I guess, but then you have the 2 games.
They're building it in such a way where he can get there.
Yeah, I guess it just depends. Like, how much do you care about those Raiders and Lions games where he was not able to get anything going on the ground? Like, personally, I have no idea. And I probably want to stay away from this one because I do think there's a lot of uncertainty here. Like, I don't think it's out of the question that he goes back to not having the attempts, just because, like, maybe just the nature of those 2 games. Like, those were both games. Well, at least the Tampa and Green Bay games were games that they were trailing. So if you're kind of playing for that game script again, maybe that leads to more.
Tampa, definitely. Green Bay, they were trailing, but they were like hanging in. They were hanging in there.
But they were in like 2-minute drill late, or like 4-minute drill their last couple drives. I get what you really want. You want dropbacks, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. If he drops back to pass, you have a chance for rushing yards. If he's handing the ball off, you have no chance for rushing yards. If you have quick passes, you don't have a chance for rushing yards. You want him to be in passing downs so that there's maybe a blitz and then he can maybe run. It's interesting from like a same game parlay perspective. So I don't generally love targeting those because I think like the correlations are probably priced very well, but you can get nuances where there are certain types of players that could benefit in a certain category based on a certain game script. Like, I do think Fields is much more likely to have rushing success if the team is losing by a lot in the second half. I don't know that that's necessarily true for other quarterbacks. Like Ryan Tannehill, for example, seems to run more when you get these like naked bootlegs on 3rd and 1 and the defense is packed at the line. And we saw him get a touchdown like that last night. Like, that's a different kind of rushing success.
Without Derrick Henry.
Yeah, who is that? I don't even remember who that is anymore. They don't need him. They have Adrian Peterson now. He's just as good.
Yep.
I truthfully, I think Peterson did look pretty bad, honestly. He had 10 rushes for 20 yards. Like, it wasn't.
It was awful, but he scored a touchdown, and that got everyone very happy. Whoever picked him up in fantasy. What are your thoughts on the total? Because it's a number. Like, how do you convince me to take the over in this game?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not going to try to convince you to take over-unders on
anything. Not me, like the general you, but you can make it about me. Because I guess I'm kind of lying, because I did say to Meiselman before the show started, don't convince me to do anything. But maybe you will.
Well, no. You're going to get out. You're going to get out with you're going to be able to escape this one, I think, because I don't have a strong take on the total. Like, more so on the spread, I think the Steelers still have a little bit of value at 7. Like, if you got them below 7, I think you should be pretty happy about that. Although I said the same thing about the Rams. Like, if you got them at 6.5 before it crossed 7, that was a great bet. It really turned out that way. I do feel similarly about Pittsburgh. But on the total, like, first of all, there's more variance on the total, I think, implicitly. So, like, it's just so much easier to see a 50-point game or a 30-point game than it is to see a team cover the spread by 10 points. And then it's just like, I think it's really dependent on what the score of the game is. I actually, the point I made before Bengals Browns was, if
total is indicative of what the score of the game is. That is a take.
I know how dumb that sounds on how close the score of the game is. From a margin
I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, right. No,
couldn't help it.
Can you imagine clipping that? How relevant of a point that's going to sound like? Really, just amazing.
It's indicative of what the score is. The total.
Yeah. No. So when I give this Bengals Browns example, it'll become clear what I actually meant by that. So for the Bengals Browns, I thought if the game stayed close throughout, you'd see a lot more running, teams playing conservative because the margin is close. So you wouldn't have these like big swings in terms of total points. But if one team got out to a big early lead, you'd see a lot more aggression, and then you get a bigger total, turnovers, pick sixes, long touchdowns, all of that. The Bengals Browns game turned into a shootout because Joe Burrow was just airing the ball out the whole second half. when the Bengals are in a close game, they basically just run 60% of their plays. So I think that's true tonight also. Like if Ben Roethlisberger throws a pick six on the first drive, there's going to be 50 plus points most likely. Like you see the total at 40, you would think, okay, if he throws a pick six, now we're at 47. I think the calculation's a little different. I think if that were to happen, you'd see it get to like 51, 55, like crazy scores. But if the Steelers have a 6-minute drive with a field goal on their first drive, like we could see 27 points, because if they don't have to be that aggressive, it's a different kind of game. So that is what I mean. It's just like, I'm almost more inclined to parlay spreads and totals together than to just pick one, essentially.
Okay. What's your gut tell you? Over?
My gut tells me the Steelers win by 10 and we go slightly under. That's gut, but I don't care what my gut says.
Okay. The Bears, see, I look at it this way. If we're going to talk so much about Najee Harris being a factor for Pittsburgh, Bears allow the 11th fewest passing yards per game. So that actually, I'm talking more about Pittsburgh's offense. If they do have to get aerial, that might actually serve Chicago better. And the Steelers, we talk, we're talking about Fields and his prop getting Montgomery back. Well, the Steelers allow the 13th fewest rushing yards per game. Neither of these teams really jump off the page defensively, but they are not abysmal defensively.
Yeah.
But once again, the combined total for these two teams this year, the under is hit 11 times in 15 games. Chicago is 2-6 to the over. Pittsburgh is 1-5-1. The Bears team total is 16.5, unless that's changed.
I think that's still right where it is.
That is not a lot of points.
It's not, but this could be a very slow-paced game, and I think it's gonna come down to if Ben Roethlisberger makes a critical mistake in his own territory or not, and that's how you get the over, which happens every so often. Just a quick point on the defenses to go back to Showdown for a second.
Sure.
I think that the Tyler Bass, Jerick McKinnon of this week, if there is like the cheap player who
Pittsburgh D.
It's the Chicago D, because if you look at the prices, I think it would have been, but Pittsburgh's a little more expensive.
Pittsburgh at $5K.
Yeah.
Bears are at $2,600. Okay.
Right. So so the reason there, it's just the pricing, and then also the fact that the Titans were in the winning lineup last night. I think that could play into what people look at for the subsequent game. Maybe that's like fractionally relevant. It's more like if you need to pick a player who costs less than $4,000, who's the most appealing option? I think it's Chicago's defense. And I generally think whoever is the most appealing player below $4,000 in Showdown is going to get an ownership bump, because people want to play the good players too. So that player last night was Adrian Peterson. He was $3,000 in Showdown, ended up being one of the highest owned players on the slate, even though he got like 10 carries. I think that player for tonight is probably the Chicago defense, boosted at least a little bit by the fact that the Titans defense showed up in winning lineups last night with their crazy game with a defensive touchdown. So the one way that this doesn't happen, though, is there a chance that Jimmy Graham is like an actual starter tonight? Am I missing something? Because he's the bare minimum.
Okay, let's take a look.
He is very far down the price. You may not be able to find him.
Jimmy Graham. There he is. $200.
Right.
He was activated Monday from the COVID list.
Yeah, but I don't know if he sees the field. Like I don't actually know there.
Let's look into it. We'll take your final questions on tonight. We can do a quick look ahead to next week as well before we go. No indications here as to what's happening with Jimmy Graham. I'm not seeing anything.
I mean, even if he plays, if he doesn't score a touchdown, he probably isn't going to have like 3 points at most. I can't imagine him getting more than a couple of targets, but I also don't even know if he's going to play. So basically what I'm saying is if we find out he's going to start or something, if there's news on that, he's going to be like the stone cold chalk, because that is now your avenue to fit in all the high priced guys. So like, that's the thing to watch out for. If we find out before, like an hour before kickoff, the Bears have some kind of announcement like, oh yeah, Graham's our starting tight end tonight, which I have no idea if that's going to happen or not. But if that did happen, I think like everyone would use him, because you really need the salary savings on this slate, and he potentially could be a guy that provides it. But if not, then we get Chicago's defense. Like that's probably the the safer choice for who the chalk is, I think, is that Bears defense.
Jimmy Graham, anytime touchdown score on the DK Sportsbook is plus 1,200.
I want to know, we should have odds on Jimmy Graham to play any snaps. Like, that would be an interesting bet. I think it would be like minus 200 that he plays a snap, but I think there's a reasonable chance he doesn't play any snaps. So just like keep that in mind if you're going to bet that, because he could play one snap and score a touchdown, right?
Why not?
They just throw him in on the goal line.
And what if something happens to Kmet? They got to go to their next guy.
That's true too. But even if Kmet's out there most of the game, they get down to the goal line, they throw 3 tight ends in, play action, Graham gets a touchdown on his only snap. Like that is, I think that's at least a possibility.
Yeah, well, it speaks back to your showdown take, or maybe it's just a fact, it's not a take, about the tight end being a factor.
I think most people would say it's a fact at this point. I'll stick to it just being a take.
Okay. The tight end being a factor in showdowns. First time playing Fortnite in the chat was advocating, or at least making a case, for Evan Ingram last Monday night. I think it was him. And it worked out. So,
yeah, Evan Ingram and Kyle Rudolph that's more examples of tight ends. They both caught touchdowns in that game for the Giants.
Oh yeah, you're right. Wow.
Those were Daniel Jones' only 2 touchdowns. He didn't throw them to any wide receivers.
Amazing. Okay, we'll take a couple more questions. We do need to go soon as it pertains to, really quick, there are folks who are in the chat here. Meiselman, you're an NBA guy as well. Do you have any thoughts on the slate tonight in the NBA? People are just wondering, do you have any a bet you're making, or Andre Drummond, got to get him in there with Embiid out? Anything you want to mention?
Let me check where Drummond's price is, because so my take on NBA is generally different than football. Like, if someone is going to be 99% owned and there's someone like Andre Drummond who costs the minimum with Embiid out, like 99% owned is 1% lower than they're supposed to be. Like, the chance of that player failing is just so infinitesimally small. Drummond's 5,700, like, you just play. I don't think you care. It's like, he's going to play 35 minutes, and unless he gets 6 fouls in 18 minutes or something, like, you're going to get enough of the game from him. Betting wise, like, I mean, if you were sharp enough to see the Embiid news and bet the line before it moved, like, that obviously is always nice. I do think that the Nuggets are getting not enough credit against this surging Miami team. They're home underdogs, no MPJ, but going into Denver is a little bit of a different thing with the altitude. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying they can't win there, but like, and they are still favored. It's just, it's a little bit harder than it is other places. And I also, this is not a take that's aged well, but I know we talked about the Warriors before the season. I didn't think they'd be that great. They're 8-1. I'm kind of buying, but I'm also kind of not buying. I think the Hawks are a really good team. 3.5 for them feels like too many points. So maybe that line should be like 1 or 2. I have some leans in the NBA. I mean, the big bet to have made past tense was get the Knicks before the Embiid line moved. Otherwise, yeah, I'm leaning Hawks, leaning towards Denver, but nothing especially strong of a take.
Okay. All right. I think it's going to do it. Unless you have anything real quick. I want to get one more thought out on the Titans. They're fun. They're fun to talk about, the Titans. They really are.
They've provided us with a lot of content over the last 2 months. Like, I feel like we've spent more time on the Titans than just about anything else.
It's actually, and you mentioned this already, it's a bummer that Jeff Ulrich is not here. Because he could flex whatever he has of muscle on his body. He could flex that muscle here on this show, because Jeff has been on the Titans since August. He took a bet on them to win the AFC at plus 1,800 and a Super Bowl bet at plus 2,500. And I'd feel pretty good about that right now. I really would. Why? Now look, now they're 3-point favorites, but we've already talked about this. That's a line that jumps out to me. They're not getting enough respect, or something's up there. 3-point favorite at home against New Orleans. I think New Orleans is a good football team. I do. I think it was a bad week, and I think Atlanta got them in a good spot with Winston out, no Taysom Hill. You got Trevor Siemian. You're asking Trevor Siemian after the high of beating Tom Brady to then win another game at home. Kind of a lot to ask. Any game in particular here jump out to you that you have a strong thought on?
Let me see. So I was just looking through the playoff odds stuff. Yeah. I think it already moved since earlier because I didn't check, but Seattle is like now a bit undervalued. Russell Wilson's coming back. I think they were about plus 200 to make the playoffs this morning. It might be a little lower now. And they were plus 5 on the spread. That's trending down too. But we do need to keep it. The Seahawks.
Okay.
If Aaron Rodgers can't make it back, though, like be ready to bet on Seattle because that's not a foregone conclusion that Rodgers is cleared for Sunday. So like that is my most relevant piece of insight. Like that's my most relevant piece of information that I can give, I think, is to just like stay on Aaron Rodgers' watch because he can't practice this week, right? Like the earliest day he can join the team is Saturday. And if there's some kind of setback for any reason, he has to miss this game. Jordan Love did not look very good. I'll just leave it at that. So Seattle with Russell Wilson against the Packers, if Jordan Love starts, like that's a crazy line. But I may even like Seattle anyway. Like the Seahawks are a good team if Wilson's playing. So I think it's kind of a good spot to buy low on them. And then similar thing in terms of news, like this is going to seem disgusting, but if Kyler Murray's out this week, I'll take 9.5 points with Carolina. Like I'm not ready to believe Colt McCoy is going to make them or is going to be able to keep them as a winning football team. I have no idea what the 49ers were doing on Sunday, but if Murray doesn't play again, like give me the Panthers.
Yeah, but I'll say this, and I think something I've come around on in San Francisco, I think a lot of us that did the Madden Sims, the Niners were the talk of the summer because of and the Rams too, because of all the movement at the draft. That is not Kyle Shanahan, like a little overrated right now with that team. I thought getting Kittle back, no Murray, no Hopkins, and that team just not ready to go. Not ready to go. And Edmonds goes out in the game. So
yeah. That's a fun one though. How do you break down Rams Niners for Monday night? Just two teams having their worst games ever.
McVay is excellent. McVay is excellent off a loss against the spread. I forget what it's absurd. It's like 16-5-1, something. It's really good.
Yeah. Maybe he needs the week to make the adjustments because they were down. I guess it was 19 points. Maybe they weren't trying that hard at the very end of the game, but
Chris Collinsworth in the broadcast last night was critical of why they didn't use Stafford more side to side to get that front seven moving. And Collinsworth couldn't have been more right. Their game plan in the first quarter, they did not adjust. They just kept doing the same thing. And the Titans were like, great, we will take it. The straight ahead passing game. The Titans feasted defensively.
You're definitely right. And then the final drive where the Rams are down 19 at the end, it basically seemed like our goal this drive is to get Sony Michel a touchdown. We're not doing anything else, which I have no idea. Like they were running the ball at the goal line. If you're going to do that, why even have your starters in the game? Like we'll cut it off here. I know we don't have much time.
Yeah,
so maybe this could be for next week, but like, can you explain to me why Dak Prescott is in the game in the fourth quarter with all of the backup receivers down 30-0? Like
Here we go. Producer Eamon, thank you. Here's the record for McVay off a loss. 13-6-1 overall, 8-2 on the road, and they are at San Francisco Monday night.
I'm scared of that spot for you. I feel like you're going to be too excited about it.
Should be rewarded if I stay away from tonight.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong about it. I'm fearful for you. That's how I feel about it.
Thank you, Meiselman. I appreciate it. That is all the time we have. You're not here tomorrow. Who is here for you? Shirag?
Shirag is here, and then I'm not sure who else, but yeah, it's at least Shirag. I'm pretty sure.
Adam Kaufman, NBA guru Adam Kaufman, more of a Celtics guru, but he knows basketball. I'll give him that. Kaufman is here tomorrow for me. I am me and Kaufman a little switcheroo on the schedule. So Adam Kaufman, Shirag Hira, maybe Julian will crawl out of bed before tip off at 7 and help out. I thought Julian was great last week. Julian had a great little weekend at the Sports Betting Championship in New Jersey. Energy, interviewing people. I was so happy to see that. Julian with a little personality, a little pep in his step. So maybe he'll join tomorrow. But
he's earned himself 36 straight hours of sleeping. That's probably what he's doing right now.
Maybe. But then he'll say he's too busy. Anyway, that's it. Kaufman, Shirag tomorrow, and maybe somebody else. For Eamon and Daniel behind the scenes, from Matt Meiselman, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for watching DraftKings The Slate. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, every weekday. 5 o'clock-ish till about 6 o'clock. And then we have the sweat tomorrow at 11 a.m. Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Hopefully catch you then. And see you back here on the Slate tomorrow at 5. Take care.